Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. If you don't know, this is sort of a prequel book in a sense to the Hunger Games trilogy. Now, I knew when I heard she was bringing out another book in the Panem world, I knew I had to pick it up, and yes, I'm very excited to talk about this book today. I didn't really know a lot about the book going into it. I knew it obviously was set way before the Hunger Games, but I didn't know anything really other than that. I didn't know who it followed, who any of the characters were. This book follows President Snow as a teenager growing up around the 10th Hunger Games. So obviously the first three books are set in the 75th Hunger Games and are sort of run by President Snow. So you're obviously going to probably, if you've picked this book up, you'll probably have already read the Hunger Games. That's what I'm going to assume. If you haven't, you need to go read those. So yeah, in the Hunger Games trilogy, they have President Snow. He is seen as this awful character. He's really like pure evil. And then we get this book, which is President Snow growing up as a teenager around the 10th Hunger Games. So I'm going to refer to him as Snow throughout this book because his full name is Coriolanus, and for the Hunger Games books, I don't ever think I thought that was his name, but that's a bit of a mouthful to say, so I'm just probably going to refer to him as Snow. And in the book they do refer to him as Snow and Coriolanus and Corio, but that's a mouthful, so like I said, he's going with Snow. So this book follows Snow as he is living in the capital. Very early on in the book we find out that he is an orphan. He lives with his cousin Tigress, who we obviously know from the Hunger Games trilogy very loosely, and he also lives with his grandmother. And the 10th Hunger Games is obviously set 10 years after the war, so they're in their 10th year of hosting these brutal games of sending children from the different districts of Panem to fight to battle and fight to the death for one victor, to show the districts that, you know, the capital is still in power, because the war was based pretty like the rebels in the districts versus the capital. So early on in this book we find out that Snow is actually going to become a mentor for the 10th Hunger Games. So I'm not quite sure how he managed to become a mentor. I think it was just because of like the school he was in. But they are each assigned a tribute from the different districts, and he ends up with the girl from District 12. And as we know, District 12 is very poor. It's obviously where Katniss and Peter came from. And obviously initially he doesn't hold much hope for this girl called Lucy. So Snow is obviously very interested in winning the Hunger Games because there is essentially a great prize for him at the end. He can go on to get tuition for university, and we find out that surprisingly Snow and the Snow family is actually pretty poor. Him and his family now live in sort of a little flat, and they don't think that they're going to be able to like keep that for much longer. It alludes to the fact that maybe pre-war they were quite wealthy, and obviously we know that he ends up being the president, so something would have changed in between that time. This, I would say, it centers sort of around a year or so. I mean less than that, so it's a very short period of time, and I will talk about that a bit more in a minute. Yeah, so he's really wanting to win this, and obviously when he gets a District 12 tribute he's a bit like, oh no. But at the reaping she sort of stands out by, she ends up putting a snake down some other girl's dress, and she stands on stage and ends up singing to her district. So straight away we can see like there's a link between her characteristics and Katniss's characteristics, in the sense that they're coming up, they're making this big public stunt, and it sort of stands them out from the rest of the crowd and becomes sort of like a public favourite. Now, very early on in the Hunger Games, it was very different from what we see later on in the 75th Hunger Games, and it was interesting to see how it developed, where it started out, and actually how Snow, through his mentorship program, had an effect on how things were changed. For instance, he brought about the things of people betting for the different tributes and sending in packages of food and drink to get more of a district and capital influence on it, to give them more of an interest in the tributes, really. One thing I forgot is how utterly brutal this book is. There are some scenes in here which you cannot believe are happening to children. For instance, it's amazing how differently they change the tributes at the start, because when we see the Hunger Games, obviously the tributes are treated a bit better. You know, they're going into these lavish hotel rooms as such before the games. They're all pampered up and stuff, but in this they're taken straight into a cattle car, and they're literally dropped in a monkey's cage at the zoo, and they are on view for all the public to come and visit them and see them, and they do treat them like animals. They don't feed them, and it was just mind-blowing to see that difference and how they once treated them so poorly. And I would love to know when that switch happened, when they suddenly started to treat tributes better and see them as people. And yeah, there was just some other brutal moments when obviously some of the characters die, both in the zoo and, you know, obviously in once the Hunger Games starts. I really enjoyed this book. I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, purely because I don't love it as much as the original Hunger Games, which, you know, it would have been very hard for it to have met that level. But I still enjoyed Suzanne Collins' writing, and I enjoyed seeing this side of President Snow as a child before he became president. You could see his characteristics, and it's interesting to see, whereas in the first 3 books you were sort of on the district side, seeing the capital as an enemy, you're now sort of almost on the capital side and seeing it from the inside of how they treat people and what it's like. And obviously Snow's there defending the capital. He obviously knows that there is some crappy stuff that goes on, but you're seeing it from a less brutal point of view. And also everything that Snow does, he sort of sees as being a good thing, and whereas if it was looked on from the outside and the districts, then obviously it looks more of a bad thing. So we're in 2 minds, because on one side we're super invested in the book and Snow as a character now, but in your mind you're hang on, he grows up to be the president and he's really brutal and he runs all these things, and we know the capital is awful and corrupted, but he is making some nice gestures in this book, and it really messes with you because of what we already know about him. And it's interesting to have sort of a villain origin book see them in such sort of a good light. So in this book we gain a new villain character, and that is the head gamekeeper, Dr. Growl. I'm not quite sure how you pronounce her name, but she is the new baddie of the book. She is the new President Snow of the last 3 books, and she is brutal, and just she thinks that everyone is on her side and wants the games to happen, and everyone should be encouraged by it and should be, you know, on her side with putting all these kids in to face their death, and obviously no one really is. And so it was interesting to see her as a character and have this new enemy come into it, and someone that you couldn't believe could be worse than President Snow, but is. So obviously the book follows Snow as he mentors Lucy through the Hunger Games. I'm not going to spoil it, say whether how far she gets in the Hunger Games for now. So I'm going to end it here if you don't want any further spoilers. If you have read this book, then you're free to like carry on, or if you don't care, then I will talk about sort of like the second half of the book when the area changes, the environment changes. But if you haven't read this book, I don't want to give you any more spoilers than that. So let me know down below if you're going to read it, and if you have stopped it here, that's totally fine if you do. But if you have read this and you want to hear my thoughts on sort of the second half of the book, then keep watching. So I would definitely recommend this book if you've not, if you have read The Hunger Games and you're thinking maybe I should pick it up. If you've not read The Hunger Games, I probably would suggest you read that first. I mean, you don't have to. It would be interesting to read this first with fresh eyes and then read The Hunger Games. But I think once you've read The Hunger Games and then you look at this, you can start to piece things together and be things that you knew about in The Hunger Games. You could see where they came from and how they developed, where they started. And yeah, so I would probably recommend you read the other 3 books before this one. So hopefully, if you don't want any more spoilers, you have clicked off by now, because I am about to talk about things that happen later on in the book, and I don't want to spoil that if you plan on reading it. So obviously we know, if you've read the book, that Lucy wins the Hunger Games, which to me wasn't that surprising. It sort of was the route that I thought it would go down and sort of mirror the Katniss element of it. The love sort of aspect between him and Lucy, again, didn't really surprise me that much. I could sort of see that relationship was going to grow and they were going to feed on that. I don't think it would have ever worked between them, because I think they are such different characters. They've been brought up in such different worlds. I think it was maybe Snow's first taste of love, and he liked the idea of being in love maybe more than actually Lucy as a character. In my eyes, I don't think it could have ever worked between them, which is sad because I would have liked it to have worked. And as you're reading all this, you're so invested, you want them to be together and live together in District 12, but you're like, in the end, you know that somehow he ends up getting back to the capital and becomes the president, and Lucy is never mentioned as like a companion for him in the other books. So you knew it wasn't gonna end the way that maybe you would have liked it to if it was a standalone book. I will say I would have liked the ending to have been fleshed out just a little bit more. I felt the end with Lucy was a little bit rushed. We don't really know what happened to her, whether she managed to escape or if she died. It's sort of left up in the air for us to decide, really. She's sort of a character that's just like thrown out the window in the end. And I would really like another book that is set following this one. So I would like this to be like a prequel series in a way, because I think there is such a vast gap between Snow. You know, we end this book with him just about going to university, and The Hunger Games starts with him being like 60, 70-year-old. So it's like, where do those rest of the 50 years go? So I would like to see sort of how his character developed, how he ended up becoming the president and sort of being obviously wealthier now, and how that changed with his family dynamic. What happened between him and Tigress, because in Mockingjay we know of Tigress, but I certainly didn't know that there was ever a connection between her and Snow, as far as family goes. And yeah, I just feel like there's a lot more that I would like to know about this world. But I did enjoy this book and reading about it. Like I said, I feel like you're constantly torn between knowing young Snow and remembering old Snow, and being sort of battling between those, and knowing that, having that sort of hindsight of knowing what's going to happen. I think if you were to go straight into this book without reading The Hunger Games, you'd be probably severely disappointed by the end, because you probably would want them to get together and it be all happiness and sweetness and light. And on the face of it, he looks to be quite a... Oh, I like how they've done that. Sorry, I've just peeled off the sticker and they've put like a piece of paper under it so it doesn't stick completely to the book. What a genius idea. So you don't get the horrible sticker residue. Anyway, what was I saying? I've lost my train of thought. Yeah, so I feel like on the surface, Snow seems like quite a normal capital boy, like quite sensible compared to some of the other characters, and maybe sort of more wiser. But if you really look into it and delve deeper, you can see that he really had some cunning ways about him, and that he wasn't really a very nice person from the start. He never really had any friends. Everyone sort of seemed to friend him up with people, and it's like he was actually quite self-dependent and didn't really need them, and the only real friendship he had was like between him and his cousin. So yeah, those all were my thoughts on this prequel. If you've read it, let me know what you think down below. And yeah, if you want to see more book reviews, then leave me a comment. Like this video if you did like it, and make sure you subscribe for my other content, and I will see you in my next one. Bye guys!